More importantly, we are going to talk about the investigation and, most importantly, the families and the victims that are impacted by this, both in Washington, in Kansas City, or in Kansas, and also, of course, the 3407 families. Brian Higgins served in the House of Representatives before and after that crash and took an integral part in all of that.
During his tenure, he pushed for improved safety in the skies to prevent a crash like that from ever happening again. He joins us now with his perspective on the tragedy over the Potomac. Thank you so much for coming in this afternoon.
Happy to be with you guys.
As we have been saying, this is the first major U.S. commercial air crash since Flight 3407.
16 years.
16 years ago.
Yeah.
When the news came in from Washington, what was your initial reaction?
Immediately thought of the families of the victims of Flight 3407. They were heroic people. I remember the day they came in to see me, probably a week after that tragedy in February of 2009. And the first thing that occurred to me is that they were so humble and so committed to making sure that what happened to them would not happen to families. And they committed themselves to a 2 decades long fight for flight safety. And they succeeded. They beat Washington, they beat Democrats, they beat Republicans that were pushing back on them. And but what they said to me that day, collectively, they didn't blame the pilots. They blamed the policy that allowed those pilots to get into the cockpit because they were not qualified in terms of their past records and in terms of their pilot training.
Brian, you were a legislator, you were a representative, congressman for almost 20 years. I could not imagine how many times you flew in and out of Reagan National. And we're starting to see so much about that particular runway, where this plane was approaching, and it being the busiest in the country. And also all of the other traffic that is flying around there that is normal. This is all routine. As you're seeing all of this new information come out, what does that make you think? You've dozens or hundreds of times.
Yeah, it's congested airspace. The only way that you come in is over the Potomac, and there's regulations that require that you come in over the water as opposed to the monuments in the residential areas. I also flew in Black Hawk helicopters in Iraq and Afghanistan. They traveled about 190 miles an hour. It's about 16,000 tons of steel. And who knows what happened here, but I will tell you this, the National Transportation Safety Board are very thorough in what they do. I remember speaking on the night of the 3407 accident to Ray LaHood, who was the Transportation Secretary at the time under the Obama administration. He said National Transportation Safety Board will be on the ground tomorrow morning. They are outstanding. They will find probable and actual cause, and that's exactly what they did.
And they had said today, the NTSB, that a preliminary report will come within 30 days. A lot of people out there saying they can't quite understand a crash like this. A lot of people, they want immediate answers, but these things take time. From what you remember from Flight 3407, maybe explain the process, why it needs time.
Attention to detail, a number of hearings before the appropriate committees, the transportation committees in both the House and the Senate. A lot of information to gather, to collect. I mean, the forensics that are involved with this, it's incredible. And it's long, it's tedious, but it's very, very important. And the heroes, not only here in Western New York, but nationally and internationally as well, are the families of the survivors of Flight 3407. They did not give up. They just persisted, they persisted, they persisted. They were probably in my office 40, 50 times over the past 20 years. And they were just, they were calm, they were committed and selfless. So it was tragic, but it was also magic. And their ability to change public policy, that should be a case study at the Kennedy School of Government because it shows how citizens can really win when they go up against the federal bureaucracy. And there was a lot of money, lobbyists, everything else involved, but they were, and I'm sure the families were Democrats and Republicans, they were Americans, and they were part of a club that they never wanted to be a part of. But they could have went and lived their lives in quiet solitude. But when you experience tragedy like that, it either breaks you or breaks you open. And this tragedy broke them open, accruing to the benefit of the flying public. For 16 years, it was the longest period of flight safety in the history of America. So even in the face of tragedy, their win is still a reminder that we still have work to do.
to that end, and I'm glad you led me to this point, but aviation experts have really been saying since this happened, since the videos started coming out, the surveillance videos showing what happened in the sky, yes, it is a devastating tragedy, unthinkable loss of life, but this is the beginning of what they would say would be a sea change in the FAA, or a sea change in that airline industry for the United States, or even the world.
Yeah.
Do you see that as this is a catalyst to something, a massive change happening? Because something would need to change.
Well, massive change occurred with in the aftermath of Flight 3407 with the legislation. What basically was going on, this is American Airlines, but it's run by a regional carrier. Prior to 3407, there were two levels of safety. One, you get on a commercial flight, Southwest, the pilots receive 30,000 hours or 15,000 hours of training. It was 750 prior to Flight 3407. There's also a database now that if you're a pilot and you're seeking employment prospectively with an airline, you can check to see if there were violations. And unfortunately, the two pilots in 3407, had some problems that may have caused the airlines to pause before hiring them. But, this is, again, 16 years of flight safety, no, mass casualties in a plane crash. This is very, very unfortunate, but we have to, celebrate the great accomplishments of the families of Flight 3407 and grieve for the families of this American Airlines flight.
Very well said. Former Congressman Brian Higgins, that is all the time we have. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights.
Thanks, guys, as always. Thank you. Thank you.